All right, hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Chase Thomas Podcast, where I'm still the aforementioned Chase Thomas, coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee, Everything School HQ. We are about 24 hours removed from the Vols getting eliminated last night in the College World Series. They finished 5th overall. Jon Tayler up there in Fangraphs. Up there in
New York City.
That's right. John, did you watch any of the Vols going out to the Tigers last night?
Until you said that they had been eliminated, I had no clue what was going on. The only thing I know about the College World Series that I've paid any amount of attention to is the ongoing Jello shot race at, what is that bar in Omaha called that does this?
I don't know, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, which LSU isn't just beating the field, they are lapping the field. Like they have, I think, their fans have done more Jello shots than all the other fan bases in Omaha combined. And
yeah,
to me, I don't care who wins the College World Series. You know, that carries no importance to me. But I do care to see if LSU can break 30,000 Jello shots before this thing is up. I think they can do it.
I think so too.
Like they were at 20-some thousand already as of like the end of the weekend, and they're still there, right? They've moved on.
They are still there at least for one more day. They have to beat Wake Forest twice to get into the College World Series, so they're in the Final Four.
Okay.
But they have to beat Wake Forest back to back to get in, which I don't think they'll do.
Ooh, spicy.
But we'll see. I mean, Wake Forest is the best team in college baseball this year, so
Okay.
Maybe
good for Wake Forest for finally being good at something, anything at all.
It's a small school. I think it's the smallest Power 5 school. I think it might be the smallest school in FBS.
Oh wow! All right,
like Wake's super small.
Go Deeks.
Go Deeks. Let me see. Wake Forest student enrollment. I'm pretty sure it's something bonkers. Yeah, 8,000.
That's not that many kids.
No, it's a small group. And it's hard to recruit when you only have 8,000 students. It's not a big base there, Jon Tayler. Well, John, it's Take Graphs here on a Wednesday evening, Thursday morning for the good folks listening on their morning commute. Thank you. What is your Take Graphs take of the week, sir? What is it this week?
I think the Yankees are in real trouble.
Oh, here we go.
No, this is not a gloating thing, because I've learned my lesson about that one when it comes to this team in particular. I'm not doing that, but. And I think I've said something to this effect before. The last time Aaron Judge went on the injured list, when he briefly hurt his wrist or shoulder or something along those lines, the Yankees offense more or less stopped functioning. He came back, things were better. He has now gone back on the injured list. He went back on the injured list 2 weeks ago with a toe injury that it will probably keep him out another month, is what the Yankees are saying. In that span of time, since Aaron Judge went on the injured list, the Yankees have the single worst offense in the entirety of baseball.
But to be fair, have you seen some of the lineups they've been trying?
And that's the thing, like, and with good reason. Like, just to give you the numbers,
made up names, John. There was a weekend, like last weekend, maybe what it was, like just real made up names, like just unbelievable that it was the Yankees and not just like the Cleveland Guardians in July. Some
Rays bullpen ass stuff. Yeah. Well, let me just give you the numbers behind it. Since Aaron Judge went on the injured list on June 7th. The Yankees have the lowest WRC plus in the majors at 71, tied with the Nationals. They have the lowest weighted on base average in the majors at 272. They have the lowest on base percentage in the majors at 260. They have the the sixth lowest slugging percentage in the majors at 366. They have the second lowest walk rate at just shy of 5%. Like it goes on like this. Like this is a whole team. This isn't just like, one guy down and everybody. This is the whole team is not functioning. And like you said, when you look at the lineup, I mean, here are the numbers.
Willie Calhoun get bat and lead off for weeks at a time. It's just
Willie Calhoun has been one of the sole good things the Yankees have had going for them in the last 2 weeks. And he, funnily enough, hasn't drawn a single walk in those 2 weeks. It's actually kind of amazing. But
145 at bats to this point. Oswaldo Cabrera has been horrific.
got sent down, but the only 4 Yankees players with a WRC plus above 100, which is basically league average, in the last 2 weeks. Kyle Higashioka in 16 plate appearances. Gleyber Torres. Billy McKinney, former Yankee, former former Cub, former a lot of things. Once upon a time a top prospect, now
Feels
a
like
journeyman
an ex-president
outfielder.
from 1894.
I'd agree with that. And Willie Calhoun. Here's some other numbers. Just so you know, Oswaldo Cabrera, before he got demoted to AAA, had a WRC plus of negative 67 over the last 2 weeks. Giancarlo Stanton's WRC plus over the last 2 weeks, 3. The number 3, as in 1, 2, 3. That's it. He has a 33% strikeout rate, a 33% strikeout rate in the last 2 weeks. Anthony Rizzo, 35. Josh Donaldson, 40. Anthony Volpe, 46. DJ LeMahieu, 46. It just goes, and like
LeMahieu being awful is a huge problem for them.
Well,
it's one thing when Josh Donaldson, 37-year-old's bad, but like LeMahieu being bad is quite bad. And also Harrison Bader being gone, who was another important cog, who's back. Didn't he just get activated today?
He's been the issue with Harrison Bader, regardless, is you can't really count on him for consistent health going forward.
Yeah.
But like you said, and this is the important thing, like guys like LeMahieu, Stanton, Rizzo's been good on the season as a whole, but not lately. They can't afford those guys being bad because, again, there's not really much depth for this team to work with, in particular when you already have, it's not as if they can bench Josh Donaldson for someone else. That's pretty much it at third base. Similarly with Jose Trevino behind the plate, that's pretty much it. They can start Kyle Higashioka more, but that's, I don't think, really going to get the Yankees what they want in particular. You don't really have alternatives to Billy McKinney and Willie Calhoun and Jake Bauers in the lineup right now. And granted, McKinney and Calhoun are both hitting well, but both of them are doing it without any semblance of plate patience. I don't know how long you can realistically expect that to last. Like, Willie Calhoun's not going to have a 350 isolated power for the rest of the season. That's obviously not going to be the case. A lot of what the Yankees need right now is, it's not just Judge to come back and be Judge, although we've already seen just how huge a difference he makes, just being there and being healthy. It's Stanton doing better. It's Donaldson finding some semblance of his old self. It's Volpe finding his pedigree. It's Rizzo staying consistent. It's LeMahieu finding a gear again. That's just not happening for the most part. And with a lot of these guys, it almost doesn't feel like, where is the optimism that things are going to get better? Like you said, Josh Donaldson's 37 years old. DJ LeMahieu is in his 30s and is striking out all the time now. Giancarlo Stanton, for as good as he's been in the past and for all the promise he has, is now 33 years old. He'll be 34 in November and just can't stay healthy. It just does not seem to be something he has, like in a capacity, or he has that capacity. Similarly, Anthony Rizzo, again, has been good this year. Also someone who's going to turn 34 this year. There are just a lot of real big question marks. And again, they've already kind of gone through the prospects that you would think would be able to help them at this point. Volpe is already up. Oswaldo Cabrera already came up and has since been sent down. Oswald Peraza has already come up and already been sent down. There's not really much, if anything, in the way of hitting prospects left in the minors, unless the Yankees want to get really, really aggressive with Jason Dominguez, which maybe I could see it if things continue to be particularly bad in the outfield corners, so long as either Judge is out or they continue to get suboptimal production from the likes of Jake Bauers, or if Willie Calhoun and Billy McKinney take a turn. But they're just, for whatever reason, this lineup just didn't receive all that much attention in the offseason, with the exception of, adding some pieces around the edges like Calhoun or like, that's really about it. Franchi Cordero. I guess that's the thing. The Yankees didn't really do much of anything offensively except for bring back Aaron Judge. And we said at the time, and it's still the case, it was the right decision to bring back Judge. He is far and away the best player on this team. They would be in absolute hell without him. And the other half of that is the Yankees spent their free agent capital this offseason, not just on Judge, but also on Carlos Rodon, who has yet to throw an inning this season, looking like he's making his way back. And that'll obviously help to some degree. But again, this lineup is bad. It is a bad lineup, even when you put Judge back in there. And he can only do so much by himself, as we saw toward the end of last season when he hit a bit of a skid, and the Yankees came very, very close to blowing their playoff spot in the process. So, and this is not a Yankees team that can really afford to fall too far back in this chase because, already the Rays have pretty much I don't want to say locked up the division because, we're not even in July yet, but, they're 10 games up on New York already. They're 5 games up on the second place Orioles. They have the division in pretty good shape. And you actually have a real AL wildcard race this year, between the Blue Jays, the Orioles, the Astros, the Angels. If the Guardians can get hot, the Red Sox, who have been hot of late and are still part of that chase. There are a lot of teams in between the Yankees and the playoffs right now. And granted, the Yankees, I believe, they're a half game, I think, behind the Astros and the Blue Jays are a half game behind the Astros and Angels for a postseason spot. The Yankees are another, I believe, game behind them. This is not an impossible place to be, but again, this is not a Yankees team that looks like it's just going to turn itself on and slug its way to the postseason. This is not really a lineup that's capable of producing with that kind of power. So consider me officially worried about the Yankees, particularly, again, they've already said Judge is not coming back till probably the end of July at this point. That's another month to try to gut it out with a really, really bad lineup doing all your work for you.
Yeah, but it's just, isn't it weird? Like, I'm still probably between the two, the Mets and the Yankees. For whatever reason, until I see it with the Yankees, I just think they're going to get a wild card spot. Until they don't, they're going to use some kind of magic. This is one of the more you have to squint this year, a lot more than you have in years past for the Yankees to get through. But for whatever reason, I can't do it. I just can't write them off. It doesn't matter. The Blue Jays are right there. The Orioles are having a great year. I can't do it. I feel like they're still going to be right there, and they're going to get the Twins in round 1, and they're going to win, and then they're just going to somehow find their way into the ALCS, and we're like, I don't understand how they keep getting away with it.
And and that's the thing. The Yankees always, and of the two New York teams, I'm more worried about the Mets in part because they just do not have any pitching. Apparently, it turns out putting all of your pitching hopes on two dudes who are basically 40 years old, ultimately not the best decision. I think
Sarah Langs of MLB.com pointed this out, like some kind of crazy stat, because this was unprecedented with Carrasco, with Verlander, with Scherzer and company, with the Mets, that I think, if I remember correctly, when she was on with Buster a few months ago, previewing the season with this group, it was like so unprecedented. Like, I think it didn't work the last time we saw something close, that there were some really bad injuries, but I feel like the returns were never good. I forgot what it was, but it was one of those early omens where you go back through the archives and there's a reason maybe that no one has ever done this to put together an entire just old starting rotation, because it's just incredibly risky. Like, if they're all healthy, yeah, it's great, but the odds are not.
The odds are not great, and that's. I mean, you're seeing that with the Mets now. They lost a wild game at the Astros today, but again, for me, where the Yankees are in particular, given how bad their offense is at the moment. It does concern you going forward. Look, I'm not going to pretend. The Red Sox
on a win streak. The Yankees can't get healthy.
I'm not going to sit here and pretend that if the Yankees miss the playoffs, I won't be here cackling like an absolute moron.
Mm-hmm.
However, there is no however there. I will be cackling like an absolute moron. But I also know enough at this point to know that you can't trust it. Like you said, they always figure out a way somehow, some way. And I think
they figure out a way to make. I'm not
going to dance on their grave yet.
But they're not winning the World Series. I don't think this is a World Series caliber team. I don't know how they get there with this group.
I am not sure either. But and I guess that's the thing. Like, I don't really see. It's gonna take pitching. In other words, if this Yankees team goes forward, it's going to be because they ride a combination of Cole, Rodon, and whoever can kind of step up for that third spot. And we haven't even talked about the pitching issues they've had with Luis Severino looking very bad, with Nestor Cortez being on the injured list, with Domingo Germán being kind of up and down, although he's been mostly good for the most part. It's going to have to be on the pitching, the bullpen, and Aaron Judge. Judge is so clearly the most important thing, the most important piece of this team, and that's the other thing is if the Yankees lose Judge for even a more extended period of time, then they are really, really in serious trouble. For as it is right now, they're doing, I think it's survivable, but they're in a bad place right now ultimately.
I agree. In a better place, Hank Davis called up to the Pittsburgh Pirates, Jon Tayler.
Yes. I like how you're calling him Hank.
I'm calling him Hank.
Let's
As someone who...
Let's make it real 50s.
Well, I mean, look, Hank Aaron. He's going to... If Henry Davis...
Hammer and Hank Davis.
I'm telling you, if Henry Davis ends up being great, he will become Hank. Like, he will become Hank Davis.
That would be really funny. It'd especially be funny if then there's a counter movement to be like, there can only be one Hank.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, that's it. There will be no more than one good Hank. Because who's the other good Hank in Major League Baseball? Is there another one aside from Hank Aaron? How many famous Hank... Like, I guess, Hank Greenberg. That was a really obvious one. But, Hank Blaylock? Hank Conger? Hank Bauer? There have been some Hanks, but it's been a while. Like, aside from Hank Blaylock and Hank Conger, we have not really had a good Hank in Major League Baseball in a bit.
And as someone whose legal name is Henry, all my friends, the only people who would ever call me Hank were close friends of mine growing up who knew I hated Henry and knew I hated Hank more. So they would call me Hank because they were just like, he can't stand it. Like,
so what you're saying is this should be the Hank Thomas podcast.
We've been together for several years now, John. I'm going to let it slide for now.
If you go by Hank, then you can be Hank the Tank. It's right there for you.
I could be Hank the Tank. Well, John, we can combine this with Hank Davis. And he's called up. Exciting times for the Pirates. They needed a jolt after a really rough June.
It's been a rough summer for them so far.
Yes. That being said, he's called up, and then there's a really good piece by, I think, Davey. Is it Davey Andrews at Fangraphs?
Yes.
Davey Andrews. Another name where I'm like, this feels like a Red Sox AAA player. Davey Andrews. It just doesn't sound right. But really good piece on Brian Hayes, who has all the makings of a star. It's just like getting the launch angle up and stop hitting the ball on the ground all the time.
Stop it now.
Just stop.
Stop it.
He's doing a little bit better at it. So what have you seen from Davis thus far, and why are you excited? Pirates fans should be excited, and then the piece on Brian Hayes and why he may be turning the corner a little bit here.
So with regards to Davis in particular, anytime you can call up a guy who theoretically at least could be the catcher of the future, you should be excited. Although, for what it's worth, I don't ultimately think that's gonna be the case for Davis because, I mean, the scouting is just not particularly like. It doesn't like his defense. This isn't, and I guess I probably should have started with this. This isn't Adley Rutschman 2.0. This isn't another franchise catcher coming up, despite the fact that Davis was, a number one pick out of a good college program in Louisville. With some very good grades on his tools, but defense is not one of them. In our Pittsburgh Pirates top prospect list that came out back in February, Eric Longenhagen threw a 30 present value grade and a 40 future value grade on Davis's fielding. That's below average. You're not gonna get a particularly good catcher. Although I think there are two reasons that Pirates fans shouldn't really worry too much about this. First is that Davis is a fantastic hitter. You look at the tool grades there: 45 future value on his hit, 70 on his raw power, 60 on his game power. That's an impact bat. If he gets the time and, can establish himself as a big leaguer. The other reason is the better catching prospect in Pittsburgh system, Endy Rodriguez, who grades out as one of the best defending catchers in the minors right now, and a guy who I imagine at 23 years old will probably be up, I'm guessing probably next year. I can't imagine there's necessarily that much of a push for Pittsburgh. I think what the idea is with the Pirates is, their current
catching... Why can't he be right fielder? He can just be the long-term right fielder.
Or I guess the idea even with Davis is their current catching tandem is Jason DeLay and Austin Hedges. Neither of those guys are the future in any sense of the word. This gives you some time to throw Davis back there if you want, see how he plays, see if he can handle essentially a major league catching position. Although it's worth noting the 2 games he's played so far, I don't know if he played today, but just the 2 games I have here on his box score, he was the right fielder in his MLB debut. He was the DH after that. And that works too because Pittsburgh's not really getting much of anything, if anything, out of its outfield corners or its DH spots.
He was DH again today in the loss to Chicago.
Okay, so 2 starts at DH, 1 start at right field. Then it's pretty clear Pittsburgh has no real interest in trying him out at catcher right now. They just want him up to be a
Which
big
might be
guy.
okay, like you said.
And I think that's fine, if he can solidify himself as a decent, or at least, at least a decent corner outfielder. I mean, the current, who is he displacing? Connor Joe, Rodolfo Castro, Cal Mitchell? Like there aren't really guys there that he's pushing out of the way that you have to worry about. And that goes as far as the future too. There aren't really, there's not a big time corner outfielder of the future still trying to make their way to the majors at this point for the Pirates. They tried Kane and Smith and Jiba for a bit. It didn't work out. Travis Swaggerty, I don't know if he's going to get necessarily another shot. You have to get down into, in terms of finding kind of outfielders of the future, theoretically for Pittsburgh, you're going down into like low A, like low A. I mean, lowest of low A. He's not blocking anyone is the point. And so I think, you might as well see, okay, can we get something long-term out of him if the bat is good and add some offense? Because, this offense is, for as much as it's struggled of late, is not a bad one between Brian Reynolds, Andrew McCutchen, although certainly not a piece of the future. Or at least we'll focus on pieces for the future between Brian Reynolds, Jack Sawinski, Cabrian Hayes, Davis, eventually Edney Rodriguez, eventually much further on down the line, guys like Leover Piguero, or Tamar, much further down the line, Tamar Johnson. There is the core of a potentially good offense there. I think it makes sense to see, though, to bring Davis up now, see can we get anything from him as a DH, as a corner outfielder if need be, and if not, try to start focusing on, okay, what can we do in the trade market maybe to address that if need be? Because the Pirates are still in this race in the NL Central. Like, no one is, with the exception of really, I think at this point, the Cardinals are pretty well out of it. But the Pirates still have, they're 5 games behind Cincinnati now for first place. That's not the end of the world. I mean, our playoff odds no longer like them at all. We have the Pirates with a 5% chance of making the playoffs. That is the lowest of any National League team that isn't at 0 already, aka the Nationals and the Rockies. So the 3rd lowest playoff odds in the National League right now. But I think if anything, if the Pirates can go 2 ways. They can see where July takes them with Davis in the lineup and be okay. If we can keep afloat, maybe there's some room there to add a bat anyway. And if things keep falling apart, well, then the rest of this year essentially becomes a tryout for Davis to see if he can be a regular presence in that lineup going forward next year and the year after that. So I think Pirates fans should be I think they should be optimistic at least. If nothing else, they're starting to see what the future of this team looks like. They had that nice run in April. It doesn't look like it's going to turn into a longer full season run, but the important thing now is, okay, who's going to help going forward in the future? And I think, getting Davis up now, letting him see what he can do against Major League pitching, I think is a big step toward that. Yeah,
and it's still a time, if you're a Pirates fan, this is exciting, and you're getting more guys that I think are going to pan out, at least to some extent, right? And then you're actually getting really good. I'm just looking at this lineup, but I'm like, this is kind of like, you see this lineup developing. If they spend a little bit this offseason, which I know it's asking a lot from this group, but like if they do, you can see like the NL Central is winnable, and you look at this lineup, it's one of the better lineups I think in the NL, and it's one of the more upside lineups in the NL across the board. Like Brian Reynolds and company, you look at this, if he's part of the field, like Andrew McCutchen is just, I think, going to be solid until the end of time. So
yeah, that's very much the sense I get. I mean, I'd like to think some of this too is just the balance of being back with the Pirates and just kind of feeding off.
I just think he's going to be solid, man. That guy's just a pro's pro who just knows how to hit enough. Like he's just going to be solid enough. Connor Joe has been good for them. We'll see if that continues on. Jack Sawinski has been good. I don't know. You just look at it and you're like, hey, I mean, there's some stuff here. Mitch Keller might be a really good long-term option. They're like, I don't know. I guess I'm still kind of hedging on the Pirates getting through this. it's just funny because like they're just you could see how it go the other way. Like right when you look at the AL Central versus the NL Central, it's kind of funny if you look at that dichotomy where like the Reds and the Pirates rebuild is kind of looking pretty solid. It looks like they might actually see the light at the end of the tunnel for those two teams. And then you can see the other side in the AL Central where it's like the Tigers and the Royals are on the opposite end where it's like, are we going to have to trade Spencer Torkelson, who we took number 1 overall in 2020 already? Because like we just can't get over this hump. We can't get
if the Tiger, and granted, like Torkelson has not been anything special so far, but if the Tigers trade Torkelson, that's at what point?
Would that surprise you if they did that this summer, though?
Only in the sense that I don't know that they get better by doing that because I cannot imagine them getting the kind of return that would actively make them better. It's
like you have to take Javier Baez if you take him. It's like
pretty much, and I think that's kind of the thing. If Torkelson were to get moved, it'd have to be something like stapled to like Javier Baez. Yeah. Or with Baez stapled to him, rather.
We should also mention O'Neal Cruz. Another fun long.
And that's a good point. Is that next year this team will have hopefully a healthy O'Neal Cruz, and that'll obviously be a really big part of that lineup too. So
yeah, Pirates fans kind of optimistic about you.
Well, there are reasons to be optimistic if you are a Pirates fan.
Absolutely, and even better, the Cardinals are dead. John,
did. Yes,
Joey Votto is back, and he's delightful. And the Reds are in first place. They're surging, big win streak for them. I mean, all the reporting over the next couple weeks has been they're going to be buyers at the deadline,
which is crazy to me. Not in like they shouldn't do that, but like I did not think we were going to get a Reds team that cared,
right? And then have like you look at the NL Central, like the Cubs are on a little bit of a weird little hot streak, but we don't believe that's going to continue. Pirates just not enough juice. The Brewers, we'll see if they hold on to Corbin Burns for the full summer.
I'm really wondering that now, given that the Brewers are no longer for it's been a bad June for them. I am really, really curious to see what comes next with them because, I mean, the room is there now if they slip further and further out of first to make that move, and I'm curious to see, if we start hearing more chatter about Burns.
I mean, you look at this group. Where could they upgrade if they look at, like, I think this is sustainable. I think they're going to be a team that goes for it and that like the Fangraphs playoff odds, they're 40 and 35 right now, 20% chance. But like, okay, that's not great. But the Brewers at 47, you don't feel great about that. The Cubs at 21, like you look around, I just think you last a little bit longer. I think those playoff odds will continue to shift a little bit and just getting more and more comfortable that the Reds are for real, but also this is why you're buyers to kind of shake those playoff odds later on this summer. But
yeah,
I think there's enough reason where like it just kind of reminds me where they're at. Reminds me of where the Orioles were last year, where they were like, we were hoping that things would go well in this rebuild and that some guys would start hitting and popping a little bit. But
yeah,
I mean, this wasn't the plan, and then they didn't really do anything. They were kind of sneaky sellers, where they're like, we're still confident we'll be able to just pick up where we left off going into next year. And the Orioles have. Like, to their credit, the Orioles have been really good and have picked up right where they left off and didn't have a setback and didn't blow it by not going more in last year. But I'm very curious what buyers looks like for the Reds and where they can go and what kind of young players they're willing to sacrifice to become more buyers. I'm very curious. What do you think Cincinnati Reds 2023 buyers looks like for them this summer?
So I think if you are the Reds and you do decide to buy and try to make the most of it, because again, like the Central is very much up for grabs, very much open. Like you said, we have the Reds with only about a 20% chance to make the playoffs, but projected to finish at 79 wins. We have the Brewers projected to win the division at 82 wins. That gap is nothing, and what helps, I think, is that for Cincinnati is the rest of the Central is about as weak, all facing roughly the same schedule. No one has any real advantage there. So if you're Cincinnati and you do really want to press this, I think there are a few places you can look. First and foremost, I think the obvious one is the rotation. Some of that is, they just have a lot of pitcher injuries right now, in particular Hunter Green, Nick Lodolo, and he's been terrible, but Graham Ashcraft. 3 guys I think they were counting on for a lot of rotation help, who for the most part, Lodolo's been hurt most of the year. Ashcraft's been very bad. Green just went on the injured list. that's a bad group right now. Andrew Abbott, Luke Weaver, Brandon Williamson, Ben Lively, and fifth starter TBD. I think that is definitely somewhere where the Reds would probably, I think, make the most sense for them to target, in particular, given that their lineup is very full right now, to the point where, granted, there's some dudes hurt right now, so they can kind of, wait and see, but...
where does Spencer Steer fit in now?
Right, where does Spencer Steer fit in? How are you balancing TJ Friedel and Jake Fraley and Will Benson all being left-handed outfielders? What are you doing? Is Jonathan India going to be a starter full-time? What are you doing with Matt McLeod? Some of these questions will be answered in the offseason and over time. But I think especially, and this is, depending, I think, especially on how long it takes or whether or not the Reds decide to bring Christian Encarnacion Strand up. I mean, we've already seen them starting to clear the decks, but they got rid of Will Myers yesterday after bringing him off the injured list. They optioned Stuart Fairchild down to the minors. They're kind of, they seem to be setting their lineup, and I think that's a lineup that they can kind of just leave set. I think the one place you might look to say, not sure about this, and this depends too on how Votto performs, is Tyler Stevenson at catcher. I liked it a lot more when Stevenson could play DH more often because he is not a particularly good catcher. But with Votto back and with Spencer Steer there, first base DH at-bats are not really open right now for Stevenson, particularly given that Steer is also a right-hander. I don't know if it makes sense to have him in kind of a loose platoon with Votto, but either way, maybe you're looking at some kind of catching help there. The backup catcher in Cincinnati is Kirk Casale at 35. A useful veteran, but I don't know if he's a guy you want to be playing all the time if you do want to value the catcher defense, particularly with young pitching. The other place I would target would be their bullpen. Obviously, Alexis Diaz, one of the best closers in baseball right now, but the rest of that group does not really give you much hope. Lucas Sims, Buck Farmer, Ian Gibaut. I literally don't recognize... Alan Busenitz? That's a lawyer name. Is that not a lawyer? That's a lawyer. They have a lawyer in their bullpen.
He might be doing both.
I think pitching ultimately is what Cincinnati needs to focus on, both in the rotation and the bullpen, if they want to make an actual playoff push. I know they have some useful arms down within their system who could maybe help out as needed. Levi Stout could be one of them. Ricky Karcher. Guys like Carson Spears down in Double-A. I don't know that they want to rush Leon Richardson or Connor Phillips. Phillips, maybe he's been very good this season. I think might be a guy who has maybe gets a look in the summer, or later in the summer, depending what Cincinnati does going forward and how Green and Lodolo and Ashcraft recover from their injuries. But yeah, if I'm Nick Krall, I am calling up the teams. I'm calling teams up and just asking, what do you want for your pitching? What's interesting to you? I think that's what Cincinnati needs to do. Again, barring injury somewhere else.
Yeah, and I think there are options. This is a good place to be if you're Cincinnati. You have too many good players.
Yeah, it's never a bad thing to have too many good players, because then you can always, you can always make it work with that.
For sure. John, Derek Jeter preparing for broadcasting this weekend in the London series. The interview, he really just didn't say anything. I went through this whole Fox Sports interview. He's so good at it. He's a Hall of Famer just for that alone. Yeah, the man can spin all kinds of words and say nothing. I respect it.
I don't particularly understand why Fox Sports is so dead set on making Derek Jeter happen. We have years and years and years of interviews, of media appearances, of commercials, of him actually being an actor, that just prove over and over again that Derek Jeter has nothing interesting to say, ever. Not only that, but he has publicly. This is a
so funny if he's the coolest dude off.
Yeah, I was gonna say if you hang out with Jeter and he's just like the most chill guy and he's just like, yo, let's do whippets, but I think he is such a dull vacuum when it comes to being on camera. He has no charisma. He has no... There's none of that, crap on A-Rod all you want for his TV presence, and I will, because I find him deeply irritating. But A-Rod at least kind of understands you have to say something. You have to just put stuff out there. I think similarly, the guys who've done well in this role, David Ortiz, Adam Wainwright, Dontrell Willis, Curtis Granderson. They all know that you have
the best?
to. In terms of the current former players who now do color?
Yeah, I think Doug Glanville's my favorite. I think he's the best.
Doug Glanville's good. David Cohn is very good.
Cohn's good.
Well, I guess that's the thing. You kind of have to go one of two ways. You can either kind of do what Coney and does and kind of go on the harder analytics route and be the kind of brainy, I know a lot of stuff, here's what I'm going to tell you voice. Or you kind of have to be a more like jovial kind of goofy persona, like
Hunter Pence. He was great with
Hunter
Grant
Pence
Brisbee
was great
on
the Apple TV broadcasts.
Yeah, he's good. Hunter Pence is good.
David Ortiz has been very good when he's been asked to do stuff. I actually have liked AJ Pierzynski quite a bit when he's done color on broadcasts. There are guys it doesn't work, but that's I think more because either it's guys like John Smoltz who come in there and they just want to use that their job essentially as a soapbox to complain or just to rant about whatever it is they feel like, or it's guys like and I'm struggling to think of one off the top of my head, but I guess a good example is. Kevin Youkilis on Nesson broadcasts. I don't know how many folks listen to your podcast.
I don't know if I want to hear Kevin Youkilis on a Nesson broadcast.
So Nesson, with Dennis Eckersley no longer being the color guy there, or the main color guy, has been rotating through a series of usually former players. They've had Tim Wakefield, Lou Merlone, a couple other guys pop in. Youkilis has done a fair amount of it. I love Kevin Youkilis. I love his commitment to the scally cap, to looking like a little newsboy all the time, but he's not good at TV stuff because he doesn't have anything interesting to say. And he doesn't really know how to jazz anything up and have, he's not bringing any energy there. I think similarly, I don't know that Jeff Francoeur is actually a good color guy if he says anything actually like, interesting or
He's fine. I think you know what I will say? Like the thing, maybe this is what you get the best case scenario with Jeets, Ortiz, and A-Rod, where there's like this mutual respect and comfortability where maybe A-Rod, because he knows him so well privately, and I think Ortiz they know pretty well, and that's something he spoke to in the interview. I wonder if they're able to bring some stuff out of him that no one else could because they're able to rib him, or they're going to be able to peel the curtain back. Because when you watched, I don't know if you knew that the Braves had a game this year, which was fantastic, where it was like Chipper, Glavine, and a couple, and Frank, and not even Frank, who was the other dudes? There were like four guys. Why am I blanking on all of them? They were all in the booth and called the game together. Francoeur, there's one more. Was it Smoltzy? Might have been Smoltzy.
Are you talking about the Braves when you're saying Glavine, Maddox, Francoeur? Yeah, I think it was they had the three Hall of Famers in Francoeur.
It was delightful.
And that's the thing. Like, if
they all ribbed each other, it was just different. I think that's the way to get it out of Jeter, maybe.
And I think that makes sense. But I think if you were going to do that with Jeter, you have to have someone with him in the booth or on the desk who knows him well enough to be able to do that stuff. Someone who's, I think, what works about that Glavine, Smoltz, Maddox trio, regardless of Francoeur, is they played together for like 15 years. Those guys were presumably, if not friends, they all at least knew each other and could at least just come from a place of familiarity. Whereas if you're just going to have Jeet sit there and be like, just talk about the game, Derek, you're just going to get bland platitudes because that's all Derek Jeter really knows how to say. He's not someone who was an openly critical guy. He's not a funny guy. It's not like a Nick Swisher type who's going to be up there cracking jokes and laughing at everything. You're going to get a guy who's going to play it pretty straight. But I don't really understand what the appeal is of that. Like, what does Derek Jeter know? I guess that's the thing. Like, what has Derek Jeter where and when has Derek Jeter demonstrated that sense of like, I'm going to share something, very particular, or that's unique or special or something that nobody knows really.
Maybe he does it. I will say, in my heart of hearts, after watching that Instagram video of him with his kids in the car that one time, do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I do.
I'm convinced Jeter's actually funny. I'm convinced that Jeter, personal home dad Jeter, is actually a good hang. I am convinced that he is so good at hiding it and everywhere else, but I'm convinced that man is a good hang. You can't tell me otherwise.
And I think that's possible. I wouldn't bet against it, but I don't know that that's going to translate to the booth. Because, again, unless they set it up so it is a hangout experience, and that means having like a Derek Jeter, David Ortiz booth that is vibes first and everything else second, I don't think you're going to get much of any interest out of Jeter because he's not a guy who tells stories. He's not a guy who is a critical, he's not going to be out there like, he's not going to be a Tony Romo type, if that could even exist in baseball, in terms of like, oh, I can see what's coming, or I'm going to be really nuts and bolts about the nuts and bolts, so to speak.
Who would be the most Tony Romo baseball pitcher, right? Probably Max Scherzer.
Yeah, well, you need a guy, I think, pitcher-wise, who's basically like, here's what I would do in this moment. And Jeter's not going to do that either. I don't think he's going to be out there being like, well, here's what I would do as a pitcher. Yeah. I think the golden standard for a former player doing color is a guy like Keith Hernandez, who is both willing to be serious about, that's a bad play, that's a good play, that's good hitting, that's bad hitting, but also just have fun with stuff and be a personality and joke around and just kind of poke fun at yourself and work within that group. I don't know that that's Jeter. I don't know that that's ever really been Jeter. And maybe guys who know him better, would say differently, but there aren't that many guys who know him better. And what are we going to do? Like, is Fox also going to hire Jorge Posada just to sit there? Are they going to go find Gerald Williams just to hang out in the booth and just make jokes with Jeets? Like, I don't really know that anyone wants to hear that.
Yeah,
which
Jeets.
I guess it takes me to the ultimate point of this. Who wanted to hear Derek Jeter's commentary?
If it's
is
good,
is that really?
Listen.
Is there an audience for that? I've never sat and watched the game and thought to myself, what we're missing right now is the insight of Hall of Famer and fraudulent Gold Glover Derek Jeter.
Wow, that was the Red Sox fan in you coming out there.
He is a fraudulent. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. We're not going to do this. But
do you want Nomar on a broadcast? Has he ever done it? I don't remember.
Yeah, he's done studio work for Sportsnet LA for the Dodgers.
Okay.
I don't know. I've never actually heard him do any of that. I guess he was fine, but that's the thing.
What's your best Nomar Boston accent?
No, well, it'd be amazing if he had the thick Boston accent.
No, I'm saying if you had to do like when they're chanting.
Oh,
Nomar.
do the Nomar Garcia Para. Nomar Garcia Para. That's a tough one. Too many R's. That's the thing. There's no guarantee a Hall of Fame player is going to make for an interesting commenter. If anything, it seems like the best commenters are the guys who are very far from Hall of Fame caliber. Granted,
they have less to lose. They don't care about their legacy. They don't care about like just a lot of the other stuff.
Yeah, and they're more than happy just to sit there and tell stories and joke around, because those guys are also like, if you don't make it in baseball because of your hitting or fielding or pitching prowess, then you're making it because you are genuinely a good, you're the kind of guy other guys want to be around. You have a clubhouse vibe that works. And that's not, Jeets was the captain, but that was not his vibe. He was not the guy who kept a clubhouse loose and conversational. He was the captain. He was a leader. He was a serious type. And I just don't know that that's really going to... we'll see, but I don't see how that translates well to being a good color guy, or at least an interesting color guy. But we'll see. Who cares ultimately? I listened to all those broadcasts on mute in the first place, so what does it matter to me? But...
Go Jeets.
Yeah, Jeets.
Team Spotlight this week, John. Where's your glowing report of the Red Sox? How excited are you about the Red Sox win streak? Do you not want to allow the Red Sox to send Adam Duvall to the Cincinnati Reds in a trade package where I feel like he's been a Red like 14 times? He's like, he just alternates getting traded to the Reds and the Braves.
I was going to say, he's been either a Red or a Brave or a Red or a Brave or a Red or a Brave. I'm not...
what do you want to do here? Are you conflicted?
Well, I don't know, because... Look, this team is not good enough to make the playoffs.
Are we sure about that?
They are 11.5 games out of first place in the division, and
division's not happening. But
division's not happening. It's possible, but for me, it's not even so much that the other teams ahead of them are better. It's that there are a lot of teams just ahead of them. You have to not just be hot, but be hotter than like 6 other teams at the same time. That's tough to do.
They have a better playoff odd than the first place Cincinnati Reds right now.
The Red Sox would be in first place in the AL Central by 3 games right now. And they have a third of the playoff odds the Twins do. I love the Central divisions. This is a perpetual, obviously.
Who would you bet on the wheels falling off faster, Justin Turner or Andrew McCutchen? Who stops being a productive MLB hitter first at what age?
Whoever gets injured first. That's pretty much it. Those guys are such professional hitters, clearly. Those dudes will just... And, similarly, JD Martinez, they'll just rake until they die. Because they'll just manage to figure it out. I think the thing that keeps me from being as optimistic about the Red Sox is... And granted, the pitching has been much better the last week. The pitching is just not there in some. You're counting on... The rotation right now is... James Paxton, Gerritt Whitlock, Brian Bayo, Cutter Crawford, rotating fifth starter because they just don't really have one right now because of the injuries to Chris Sale and Tanner Houck, and the demotions of to the bullpen of Nick Pivetta and Corey Kluber, and Corey Kluber now on the injured list. And I would not be surprised if that's the end of the road for Corey Kluber. He has looked really bad, both as a starter and a reliever this year. If the Red Sox were to go out and add a starter, like an actual above league average starter, I would feel better, although I still don't know at that point just because, the four teams in front of them in the division are really good. Even with me crapping on the Yankees for just not having an offense right now, those are four really good teams ahead of them. To say nothing of the Astros and potentially the Angels also being ahead of them in the postseason chase. You asked me to rank those teams in terms of how optimistic or likely they are, how optimistic I am or how likely they are to make the playoffs. I mean, I don't know that the Angels are a better bet than the Red Sox, but after that, I feel like the Red Sox are in kind of the same. There's not really they need to differentiate themselves somehow, and I think it has to be they need to go and add pitching because you're counting
need
right now.
If you look at it, they're in Major League Baseball in hits.
I think
behind the Rangers and the Blue Jays.
Their offense is fine. I think the other thing they would need to focus on is getting a legitimate shortstop. And whether or not that they're waiting for Trevor Story to come back and seeing if he can do it, or getting getting proactive and going out and finding someone. It's just not working right now. Kike Hernandez, God bless him for trying. He is an awful defensive shortstop. He cannot play the position anymore. I don't know that you can roll forward that. I mean, because this team also defensively is just not very good for the most part. The outfield is okay, but the infield is kind of a mess. The catching is okay as well. This is not a team that's going to win with pitching and defense. This is a team that's going to win because it out-hits you. And I think that's certainly something that's feasible over the course of a season, and I think why you see the Red Sox are capable of going on these runs because they can just beat up on bad pitching or take advantage of a team that maybe has its pitching a little scrambled right now. But when push comes to shove and they're facing good pitching and they need to scratch out runs and manufacture them, I think it's going to be a lot harder, especially because they're going to have a harder time keeping runs off the board with their pitching and defense. So I'm not optimistic that the Red Sox are a playoff team. I'm happy to see them playing this way. This way beats being a sub-500 team, that's for sure. But I think a good Red Sox team is still at least another, like a contending, World Series contending team is at least another year or two away, depending what happens this offseason.
I think the Red Sox are going to hang around. I think everyone in the AL East hangs around until the end of the year. I don't think
I agree with that because there's, again, the only real competition that the four non-Rays AL East teams have in the wild card are the Astros, the Angels, and maybe the Guardians or the Twins, depending on who wins the Central.
Maybe the Mariners.
That's not so. Realistically, that's the Astros. You're not. I don't know if any of those teams are really worried about the Angels or the number 2 AL Central team. So, that's. I think if you're in that group, you're feeling pretty good ultimately. But otherwise, who knows? We'll see.
Guardians have 46 home runs still to this point there.
They're not a good offensive team. Not in particular.
For comparison, the Braves are at 128 right now.
Yeah.
And I think Matt Olson has 112 of them.
The one he hit against the Phillies either yesterday or the day before that went approximately 900 feet and also about 3 miles into the air. Very impressive.
Yeah. We'll end on the San Francisco Giants, Jon Tayler. They're on a big win streak right now. They win in a walk-off walk. Do you like those orange-white uniforms they wore last night? Do you like them?
The City Connects?
Yeah, do you like those?
They're fine. I think most City Connects are fine. I don't think there's been a truly bad City Connect uniform.
Yeah.
I think they're mostly fine, and then there's some genuinely good ones. Like, I like Miami's. I like... who else has a good one? This is killing me.
Braves are pretty good.
Remember. I like that they're throwing it back to the 70s with that one. Mm-hmm. Although my take on
I actually don't hate the Orioles. I actually like the Orioles.
The Orioles one looks better in person. I saw someone the other day wearing an Orioles City Connect cap in person, and it looked way better than it did in a photo. Yeah, but either way, like, boy, the NL West is an absolute mess right now. I mean,
the Giants are ahead of the Dodgers now.
They're ahead of they're only 3 games behind Arizona for first place. it's really wild how good that division has suddenly become. And I think that's the thing. Like, we were always kind of expecting a 2-team race in that division between the Dodgers and the Padres. Then we get the Diamondbacks thrown in and go, okay, well, now it seems like there's we've talked already, the Diamondbacks are legitimate. And now the Giants look pretty legitimate too. And I don't know how long that's going to hold, but they've gotten some great hitting of late from, in particular, some guys back to health like Jock Peterson. Luis Matos has been very good since being called up. Losing Mitch Haniger hurts, but the pitching has been good too. Camilo Doval has been one of the best closers in baseball. I don't necessarily know that the Giants are a division-winning team, but again, they're 41-32 right now. Our projections have them winning 88 games. 70% chance of making the playoffs is pretty damn good. You're now looking at an NL West where the Padres are projected to finish fourth with 85 wins. And I think more than the question of are the Giants legitimate, because regardless of whether or not they're legitimate, they would have to go on a pretty bad losing streak at this point to fall out of this newfound playoff position they're in, is the Padres are really, really in some trouble right now too. In that they could not afford another team joining this NL West race. They already had enough ground to climb, to crawl, or to make up behind the Dodgers and the Diamondbacks. Now they're behind the Giants too, and substantially so. They're 3 games under 500. Our playoff odds are now below 50% for them, about the same odds as the Brewers do, or as the Brewers have, which should say plenty. About the same odds as the Phillies do. This is a really bad place for the Padres to be, in particular, given that just, nothing is really going right for them in terms of guys being healthy, guys producing. They've got issues in pretty much every department. Good for the Giants, and I'm happy to see an NL postseason race that's actually between the Giants and the Marlins coming to life. We actually now have some real NL contenders to make up for the fact that the Mets and the Padres are both just sucking eggs. So I guess that's the thing. It's like, God closes the door on the Mets and Padres, but opens the window for the Giants and the Marlins. Definitely the 2 teams we wanted to see get involved in the playoff chase, but the Giants seem very legitimate to me. Are they as good as their winning streak is? No, no team ever is, but they look like a legitimate, at least above 500 team, and that just increases the pressure all the more on everyone else in the NL West to continue to succeed.
I think they're going to hang around. I think the Giants are going to hang around, and they are an interesting buyer team and what they could actually do. They are fascinating.
Yeah, and I think that's the other side of it is, we've talked already about the Reds potentially being buyers, the Pirates potentially being buyers, the Giants being buyers. I think you're going to see the Diamondbacks as buyers. I'm certain you're going to see the Padres try to buy their way out of this mess. The Phillies, the Marlins, the Braves, obviously. The Mets, I can't imagine are just going to sit back on their heels.
I don't know about the Mets.
I feel like they have to do something unless they come into the trade deadline like just completely out of the race. They have to do something.
Yeah,
I don't think Steve Cohen. I don't think Steve Cohen just sits around.
David
and does
Stearns
nothing.
this summer. Finally bring him in. What are we? Billy Epler is I don't know what the odds are on Billy Epler being back as GM next year, but I'm going to go ahead and whatever it is, buy now because
Billy Epler's not coming back as the Mets
he
GM
is gone.
Billy Absolutely Epler is gone. Absolutely, neither he nor Buck Showalter, I think, unless the Mets go have a tremendous second half. I don't think either of them comes back for next year. But
how many contenders are looking at the Giants run here, where Michael Conforto is having just an all-time great, he's a great story this year. We should mention it's just he's having a great year and he's healthy. He's 30 now, 107 WRC plus. The power's back a little bit, 12 home runs. He's fun, but the Giants have a roster literally set up for contenders who are looking to kind of buy this summer,
and
right?
That's
there's so many guys that everyone's oh, damn it, the Giants are good. I wanted Descalfani. I wanted Alex Cobb.
You wanted a Jock Peterson.
Yes.
You were maybe going to kick the tires to see what do you guys want from Wilmer Flores?
Yes.
If you're looking for a right-handed infield bat. But I think that's the other side of this is with the Reds and the Giants and the Marlins, all 3 of them now kind of entering the postseason race, or at least the playoff picture. There are not a whole lot of distinct sellers around the majors.
Yeah.
Every team in the AL East is above 500. The teams in the Central and West in both divisions that are out of it are not just out of it, but also don't really have anything to offer,
Yeah.
The Royals, the A's, the Rockies. Who knows what the Rockies ever want to do. The Nationals. There's not a whole lot that those rosters have left to offer to any contender. So at that point, you're kind of just waiting to see, okay, are the Cardinals just going to throw the towel in? How much more do the Padres and Mets have to fall out of the race before they decide to do something about it? Or what about? I think at this point, the team you're really looking at to see, I think there are two teams you're really looking at to see if whether they decide, screw it, we're done. The White Sox and the Mariners. The Mariners in particular, who are we have their playoff odds at 19.6%, lowest in the AL of any of any 500 or above team, with the exception of the Central. They're in a tough position right now. They're behind 3 teams in the AL West. They're behind 6 or 7 teams in the wild card. It's a rough spot for the Mariners right now, and I do wonder, whether or not that's a team that just decides, hey, we tried, not going to work. We're going to try to add some more long-term pieces going forward. But I think similarly with the White Sox, they've pushed themselves back, I think, into at least division contention, even though they're 11 games under 500, which God bless the AL Central. But I don't think it would take much for Chicago to decide ultimately it's not our year. It's not going to happen. The path is too narrow, and then that again becomes a question of Lance Lynn, Lucas Giolito, Tim Anderson. Do any of those guys make sense to move from where we are right now? I think those are two teams that a lot of contenders are going to be looking at the next few weeks to see, are they going to, which way are they going to end up kind of moving? Are they going to try to buy themselves back into this race, or are they going to decide, what? It's too late for us. We don't have what it takes. We're going to be sellers and take advantage of the fact that there might be a bigger than normal buyer market.
I agree. Jon Tayler, what can the good folks check out from you and the team over at Fangraphs.com this week, sir?
So we will have, I think, the most interesting thing in my mind is a piece on Luis Arias from Dan Szymborski, projecting him outward to see what the odds are of Luis Arias being able to hit 400 or get anywhere close to it. Otherwise, we have yet another top prospect list coming out this week, or I believe either late this week or early next. The Arizona Diamondbacks, one of the finest systems in the majors, has already churned out a lot of really good, a lot of good players, notably Corbin Carroll, but also some guys beyond that. So be sure to check that out. If you missed it, we put out a draft board rankings update last weekend. So if you were getting ready for the draft, which is coming in, 2 weeks at this point? Just about around. Go check that out. Eric Longenhagen threw a ton of work into that, as he always does.
Did he do a mock?
We haven't done a mock, and I don't believe we're going to do a mock.
Okay.
But our board draft rankings are essentially a mock in that Eric has everyone ranked by how he would take them if he were in charge. Great. It's not a mock in the sense he's not saying like, if I were who has the number 1 pick this year?
That's a good question.
Pirates
or Nationals?
Some bad team that doesn't deserve who they're whoever Dylan Cruz has to suffer with for the next 6 to 7 years of his life.
It might not be Dylan Cruz. It might be Paul Skeens, man. That dude is, after getting Paul Skeens again this weekend, he is something else. Pirates have number 1.
Okay, so
Nationals are number 2.
Be it Dylan Cruz, be it Paul Skeens, be it Wyatt Langford, maybe the top high school player in the class, Max Clark, or maybe Walker Jenkins, your boy Chase Dollander.
He feels like a Colorado Rockies pick at 9, unfortunately.
The incredibly named Hurston Waldrep. Love that name. That's a great name.
Mm-hmm.
Wake Forest ace Rhett Lauder is in our top 10 as well. Go check that out if you haven't, and if you're a draftnik. We will have some College World Series stuff also, I'm assuming, going forward from our resident college sicko, Michael Bauman, who's actually at the draft combine right now. So definitely check us out over the next couple weeks for draft stuff, for prospect stuff. Obviously, that all starts ramping up heading into the draft and through the College World Series, and obviously going into the trade deadline, because prospects are what make the trade deadline do its thing. So come over to Fangraphs, and while you're here, sign up for a membership. $5 a month, $60 a year gets you ad-free browsing plus other cool stuff. Fangraphs, come here, baseball, and it's good.
There you go. I love it. Jon Tayler, always a pleasure, and I'll talk to you next week.
Sounds good.
Well done, nephew. Chase Thomas Podcast. Hell yeah.